Hello everyone and welcome back to the Ember BTC channel. Today's video is going to be a Bitcoin market update. Since our last market update video, we've had a massive flush out. So let's drop down to the lower time frame and take a look at what we thought would have occurred in our previous market update video. And then let's see where we're at and what I think might happen next. So in our last market update video, we were in and around this region and we had just approached new all-time highs. We had this kind of weak enough momentum on the lower time frame run up into this lower time frame high, which then we had that SFP. We dropped down below this low, so breaking lower time frame structure. So if this one was bullish because we were putting in higher highs and higher lows and failing to get below the previous lower low, now we reached an area of interest, which of course was previous all-time highs. We then had this shift in structure, which tells us that buyers are potentially losing momentum and sellers are potentially entering the market, given that we're now in a point of interest. We then had this run up into this demand zone, also in confluence with the underside retest of the previous all-time high or range highs. And then of course we started to break down, and then something that cannot be exactly predicted happened, where Trump imposed the 100% tariffs on China, which then caused this frenzy. We were potentially watching this area for longs, but this is another reason why you can't just place blind bids, and especially why you shouldn't trade necessarily with no stops if you are going to place blind bids, because there was a lot of liquidations. As you can imagine, no one could have held any sort of leveraged position, especially not any highly leveraged position, on a move this significant. So as of the moment, we have had, of course, this long wick, and then we came up, and now we've got a bearish underside retest of this key SNR zone, which is in around that mid-range point, and then we are moving with quite a lot of momentum to the downside. So what do I think on the current market conditions, and what are my thoughts? So if we go to the daily time frame and even can be consistent and go the weekly time frame, you can see that we kind of have this SFP that of course we formed on that 4-hour time frame on the lower down market structure, but then again similar on the higher time frames. This time we've made it with momentum, and if we were to come down and say close below this low, all of a sudden you start to look at potentially a bearish underside retest in this region, and then potentially continuation down towards this low. We could, of course, bounce here, but given the momentum and then also the idea that we like to fill in these wicks, example, in this region we had this huge flush out and then wicked back up, but then in the following week we filled it back in, came down, took the low, then swept this low again into a higher time frame point of interest, which was that summer 2024 range. If I just move this, yeah, that summer 2024 range that we were chopping in and around at this previous all-time high from 2021. So I do think we will fill in this wick right down to 100k, which is what I'd imagine will be a strong support zone, given it's a round number. And then we have this range low, this black line, in and around the same region. So similar to what I said in around this area in regards to we're at new all-time highs, I wouldn't be rushing in here to make any sort of massive bids long. I also wouldn't necessarily be rushing in to fill or flood the market with shorts as of the moment, given that we are in this higher time frame key SNR zone, just given that we had resistance in this region. Then we kind of had resistance in and around this previous consolidation. Then we broke up. Of course, we've had it flip to support and then found support within it again here. And now potentially, given that we haven't closed below, we may find some support here. And if we are, well, then maybe we do continue to range between range lows and range highs until you break out of a range and then get confirmation on, say, something like this. We do have to assume, no matter how ugly it may look, that there's no necessarily need to make any rash decisions. Although I do believe that if we do break down and price comes back up into this region in confluence with, say, these green uptick candles, potentially that might be a nice short, even just to the low here. There's also the possibility that potentially we have put in the top for this cycle at 126k, and potentially this was a distribution phase above these range highs. So if we draw our range like such, I just remove the 618. We look at, again, a common theme we've talked about a lot on this channel, about moving from range low towards a deviation and then potentially break down, get acceptance back inside the range, and all of a sudden we look then to push down and maybe create a similar deviation outside of this range low. So of course, depending on what sort of trader you are, I'm sure if you're, massively into scalp trading, that of course, you can pretty much continue to trade the market in both directions because you're not necessarily holding positions for very long. My concern would be if we get a close below this low with momentum, so close below these lows, come up. This would be a strong confluence area for shorts to enter the market. Then all of a sudden we start to form some higher time frame bearish structure. And then of course that becomes the slippery slope as such. So as of the moment, I'm not massively interested in longs until the markets settle down. I'll go back to what I said in this scenario where you have this massive flush out, and then on the weekly you get this sharp retracement, and then I guess any trader who had entered a position in here long and somehow managed to not get liquidated enters in the market and closes their position in and around break even. And then of course the self-fulfilling prophecy of this appearing to be resistance, and then you get a continuation. I think we have a similar sort of scenario on the cards here where you get this massive flush out, a sharp, dead cat bounce, and then potentially a continuation back down towards this low. For me, is probably the highest probability outcome based on the current price action. I'd also like to encourage you to take a look at the DXY, which is the dollar strength index, which tends to usually coincide with tops and bottoms in BTC. So in this instance, we have these lows put in and around that 2021 initial high at 63k, and then we have this FTX fueled run, which of course led to an FTX fueled bear market. But similar to the DXY lows come in conjunction with the highs here, you have the bear market lows coming in somewhat conjunction with the DXY highs, and you can see that my X and Y axis toggles are shown on both sides of the TradingView charts. You can see they're in and around the same level. And now, similar here, where we had this kind of failed run here on this down cycle, and then the low put in before a sharp drop Now we're in and around this key SNR zone where it's been quite pivotable on the higher time frame, and we have had a nice bounce, and then we've put in these two lows and had a similar sort of SFP of this low here in conjunction with, say, this high here, sweep, and now DXY is pushing back up, and it is coming into potentially a significant resistance level where it had this long drawn out accumulation and then deviated outside of the range, and of course trap traders and breakout traders and feel the market was going to go higher, dropped down, found resistance. So potentially the XY could get into this region and find resistance again and potentially drop down. But I do think potentially we have seen a low put in on the DXY, and it may start to run up, which then would of course have a history rhyme scenario where this is the top and DXY has put in a bottom. So that's all for today's market update video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe. Leave a comment on what your thoughts of the current market conditions are, and I'll see you guys in the next one.